Good evening! Hello, guys! Dear prison directors, I said to the 3 prison directors here, can I organize a screaming concert in your jailhouse? I wanted to design a score together with the prisoners. A score they would scream each from their own cells in all 3 wings of the building. It would make the prison vibrate and the bells of the chapel pale. On set days, at set hours, a collective muezzin of punished men. The prison directors, number 1 and number 2, to my great surprise, said yes. Thank you, prison directors! Only they didn't allow the prisoners to scream individually from their cells. Whoever can be put in a 9 square meters cell together with whomever. A psychotic person with a car thief. A drug addict with a murderer. The screaming would cause chaos in the cells, they said, uncontrollable by the guards. I understood. I came up with a new proposal. A choir of about 15 screaming men in the Wandeling, the place where the prisoners walk. And yes, prison director number 2 said, a screaming choir of 15 men in the Wandeling would be accepted. No further questions were asked. Jacob, Berno and I then started a workshop series in July. The first time we had 5 men. Let's call them Jack, Jean, John, Jimmy and Jamil. We tried all kinds of shouting and screaming. They were fantastic! But might not come back since he'd probably be released soon. Jack and Jimmy were mocking him. He's one of those guys who repeats every day that he'll go free, they said. But it never happens. Yet, when we entered jail for our second session, there he was, Jean, at the prison entrance, raising his arms and smiling, a free man. The third round then, only 3 screamers were left because Jamil had started the Ramadan and was sleeping in his cell. The voices of Jack, John, and Jimmy were flourishing. But I was thinking it might be hard to form a screaming choir with only 3 men. I investigated why no new participants were joining the screaming gang. Some telling facts popped up. More prisoners were interested, but those were either having visitors or they were working during rehearsal time. For work in the kitchen or cleaning or whatever, they received 60 cents per hour. I had told the prison directors I wanted to pay our guys for their screaming work as well, but they wouldn't permit. Screaming is not working, they said. One shouldn't be paid for having fun. Some workshops are considered as restorative practices. If prisoners follow a restorative workshop, they get positive feedback for their reports. Storytelling, for instance, counts as a restorative practice. Screaming is not restorative. Another reason for low turnout. One could not go to the workshop without registering, meaning the prisoners had to ask the guards for a form and fill it out. Once filled out, they had to go to the library and give it to the librarian. The librarian had to collect the papers and pass them on to the responsible for cultural activities. The responsible for cultural activities had to put the names of the men from the forms all together on a list. This list had to be given to yet another person who with that list could then go get the prisoners and bring them to the rehearsal space. This complicated chain of actions turned out to be too involving for the prison staff, of which half was on vacation. It was July, it was Ramadan, it was super hot. Bringing the guys from their cell to our workshop was far too engaging a thing. So no high hopes for the coming of more prisoners. But we went anyway to the 4th session of our prison workshop. Jacob, Berno and I made a test. 2 of us stood in the bushes over there. On the other side of that wall, there is the Wandeling. Jacob went there and started his screaming tryout. He'd only begun when some guys in their cells were already raising their voices. Especially this one guy, very close from where we were standing, was very disturbed by Jacob's screaming. He kept yelling, "Hey, faggot, shut the fuck up, I want to sleep!" A very strong voice he had. Others were excited, wondering about what was happening. One of our screamers, shouting from his cell, was trying to explain to the others that this was screaming art. But the guy in the front kept freaking out, and a guard had to come to calm him down. When we met Jacob after, he said he felt very intimidated, and he had no voice left to scream. That same day, Jimmy was released from prison as well. I was very happy for him. Jimmy's still very young. But that left us only with Jack and John. One detail I didn't mention yet is that Jack is a professional singer with a very particular screaming palette. Singing is beautiful and restorative. Singing has a calming effect. Singing is like working. It's normalizing. That was Jack. After 5 sessions, with only one screamer and one singer left in our choir, I had a talk with director number 2, with the responsible for culture, the responsible for the Flemish government, the responsible for the library, the responsible of the psychosocial service. There were more responsible persons around that table than we ever had screaming prisoners in our workshop. I pointed out that problem to them. The librarian turned out to be our guardian angel.
Bless her!
She said they could have known from the start that a workshop with 15 participants is an idle illusion in this prison. It never happens, not even 10, and certainly not during the wandeling or the visiting hours or the working hours, during summer, during Ramadan, with none of the responsible person present. The person present stayed silent first, no comment. Then they told us that the concept of a screaming choir was too difficult for the prisoners, too challenging, negative peer pressure. One has to be really tough to resist and stand firm. The project had fallen out of grace with most of the prison staff after the incident with Jacob in the wandeling. And once, John had screamed at the guard when he entered the rehearsal space. The guard hadn't particularly appreciated that. There had been complaints of one of the neighbors. I knew all that would come up. In a country where a woman gets a fine for spitting out a cherry pit in the street, where in some cities fortune telling and dream interpretation is forbidden, and in other cities street musicians have to pay 150 euros when they get caught playing out of tune. I understand screaming is the most controversial thing. In Berlin, they had to give the sound of playing children the same exceptional legal status as church bells, emergency sirens, snowplows, and tractors to prevent complaints. A screaming choir in this specific jail was an impossible thing to achieve regarding its precarious social body and the limbo these men are in. I understood. I came up with a final plan. To avoid bureaucracy, ponderous logistics, and selective unwillingness, I proposed the directors a series of simple, minimal scream donation sessions. No rehearsals, no explorations, a single 40 minutes crash course, windows closed, screaming out straight away all that is inside. Singular screams of volunteer prisoners, voices like fingerprints. The directors said yes. Thank you, Jamil. There is nothing more personal than a voice. Screaming is something very intimate. To open your mouth and let off sounds from a hole in the middle of your face. But you do it. You speak or you scream primarily in order to be heard. And the idea of being heard, of possessing a voice, nearly coincides with that of human and civil rights. Having a voice is much the same as having a vote. A voice is never a voice in general, though. It's always a voice of a particular kind. In the end, we scream alone. Even if we all scream together, we scream alone. You scream alone. With great power, you push air out of your lungs, through your throat. Screaming isn't organized. You scream alone, and you scream even if no one is listening. The librarian decided to help and communicated my invitation to individual scream donations directly to the man. She skipped the forms, skipped the list, skipped the responsible who had to make the list. She just encouraged people to join the crash course screaming. John recruited screamers amongst his peers, and some of the staff and coordinators got very active. Thank you. The prisoners came, 3 at a time. They were fantastic. One guy decided to scream "Libere" as a donation for the installation. You can listen to him and the voices of about 20 different screaming prisoners now. Feel free to scream with